A flight attendant, drunk on his own authority, makes a fatal error at 30,000 feet. He jabs a pen into a passenger's neck, not realizing that man was Jason Statham. The world was about to watch his life unravel. The first-class cabin of Oceanic Air Flight 815, a direct route from London to Los Angeles, was an exercise in controlled quiet. The air hummed with the low thrum of the engines, a sound insulated by plush carpeting and the soft clicks of champagne flutes being set down on polished wood trays. Business magnates reviewed quarterly reports on glowing tablets, their tailored suits unwrinkled. A famous musician was asleep under an Hermes blanket, noise-canceling headphones sealing her off from the world. And in seat 2A, there was Jason Statham. He wasn't there as a celebrity. He was there as a man who simply needed to cross the Atlantic. No entourage, no fanfare, just a last-minute ticket booked for personal reasons. Dressed in a simple black Henley and dark jeans, he looked less like a movie star and more like an off-duty professional who valued anonymity above all else. His head was tilted back, eyes closed, but he wasn't asleep. He was assessing. The click of the galley latch, the slight tremor in the flight attendant's hand as he poured a drink, the precise distance to the two nearest emergency exits. It was a habit forged in a past life, one that never quite faded. The lead flight attendant in this metallic tube of privilege was Leo Vance. Tall, with meticulously coiffed blonde hair and a smile that never quite reached his eyes, Leo saw the first-class cabin not as a service area, but as his stage. He was a minor lifestyle influencer on Instagram, and his posts often featured artfully framed shots of his uniform, the luxury cabin, and vague captions about living the high life. He thrived on the deference of passengers, on being the gatekeeper of their comfort. From the moment Statham boarded, Leo felt a prickle of annoyance. There was no flicker of recognition, no deferential nod, just a quiet "cheers, mate" as he stowed his worn leather duffel bag. Statham's silence was a void where Leo expected admiration. It felt like a judgment. The first microaggression was subtle. As Leo distributed hot towels with theatrical grace, his tongs seemed to glide right past Statham's seat, a deliberate oversight masked as efficiency. Statham didn't react. His eyes remained closed. An hour into the flight, Statham signaled a passing attendant. "Could I get a bottle of water, please?" he asked, his voice a low, polite rumble. Leo intercepted, stepping in with his signature smile. "Of course, sir," he said, his tone dripping with a cloying, performative servitude. "Right away for you." He returned with the water, placing it down with just a little too much force. The plastic bottle wobbled. Statham's eyes finally opened, a flat, neutral gray. They met Leo's for a fraction of a second. There was no anger in them, just data. He was seeing Leo for exactly what he was. And Leo, feeling that analytical gaze, felt his own insecurity curdle into resentment. This quiet man in the corner was unimpressed, and in Leo's world, that was the ultimate insult. The quiet tension in the cabin had just found its focal point. The dinner service began 2 hours later, a carefully choreographed ballet of clinking silverware and hushed requests. Leo was in his element, presenting wine pairings and describing the pan-seared salmon with the flourish of a Michelin star maitre d'. When he arrived at seat 2A, his professionalism fractured. He placed Statham's tray down with a careless thud. The small ceramic bowl containing a side of hot, fragrant Earl Grey tea tipped, sending a wave of scalding liquid across the crisp white linen and onto Statham's jeans. The heat was sharp, instant. Statham didn't flinch. He didn't curse. He simply raised his hand, his gaze fixed on the spreading stain. "You've got a towel?" he asked, his tone even. Leo, who had already turned away, spun back. The polite request, devoid of the panic or anger he might have expected, felt like another challenge to his authority. He smirked. "Oh, I'm sure a tough guy like you can handle a little spill," he sneered, the words loud enough for the surrounding passengers to hear. A few heads turned. The quiet hum of the cabin faltered. Statham slowly, deliberately, folded the soiled napkin and placed it on the tray. He looked up at Leo, his eyes now devoid of any neutrality. They were cold, hard, and utterly focused. "This is unprofessional," he stated, not as an opinion, but as a fact. "Correct it. Now." The command, stripped of any emotional plea, was a direct assault on Leo's fragile ego. This wasn't a passenger asking for help, this was an expert identifying a failure. Leo's face flushed a deep, ugly red. "Or what?" Leo snapped, stepping closer, puffing out his chest. "You going to do one of your movie stunts on me? Throw me through a wall?" Statham didn't answer. He simply reached into his duffel bag, retrieved a small, sealed envelope, and held it out. "Complaint form," he said flatly. "Signed and time-stamped. Give it to your superior when we land." The sight of the official document, the sheer, bureaucratic finality of it, sent Leo over the edge. This wasn't just a complaint, it was a permanent mark on his record, a threat to the curated perfection of his online persona. His authority, his very identity, was being systematically dismantled by this quiet, unimpressed man. His eyes darted around, landing on the sleek, metallic pen clipped to his uniform pocket. It was a high-end model the airline provided, heavy and solid. In a moment of pure, narcissistic snap, his hand shot out. Shick. The sound was small, but it cut through the cabin noise like a razor. Leo lunged, jabbing the pen's sharp point hard into Statham's neck, just below the jawline. Gasps erupted. A woman screamed. Blood, dark and immediate, welled up and trickled down the collar of his black Henley. For one silent, suspended moment, the entire plane seemed to hold its breath. The attack was shocking, senseless, and utterly real. Before the scream had fully faded, before Leo could even process the feeling of the pen striking flesh, Statham's hand moved. It wasn't a panicked swat or a furious grab. It was a blur of biomechanical efficiency. His fingers didn't just seize Leo's wrist, they clamped down with surgical precision on the radial nerve point. A jolt of pure, electric fire shot up Leo's arm. His fingers went numb, and the pen clattered to the floor, forgotten. He tried to pull back, but his arm was caught in a vice of flesh and bone. There was no escape. Statham stood up, not with the explosive energy of a movie hero, but with the fluid, centered gravity of a predator. He used Leo's own forward momentum as a fulcrum, executing a flawless pivot that spun the taller man around. With controlled, almost gentle pressure, he guided Leo's face into the smooth, unyielding surface of the galley bulkhead. There was no violent slam, just a firm, undeniable placement. Leo was pinned, neutralized, his struggle rendered completely useless. The cabin was frozen in a tableau of disbelief. Passengers stared, their phones held aloft, recording every second. Statham, with a small, bleeding wound on his neck, stood calmly behind the whimpering flight attendant, his hands still applying pressure. He leaned in, his voice a low whisper directly in Leo's ear, meant only for him. "You just assaulted a passenger." On a federal level, he breathed, the words cold and final. "You're done." Within a minute, the cockpit door opened and the co-pilot emerged, followed by two men from the back of the plane who had been sitting quietly until now. Their jackets were off, revealing the unmistakable credentials of U.S. Air Marshals. They took in the scene in a single, practiced glance: Statham, calm and in control; Leo, pinned and sobbing, the pen on the floor, the blood on the collar. "Sir, we have him," one of the marshals said, his voice firm but respectful. Statham didn't release Leo immediately. He held the position for another second, ensuring a smooth transfer of control. "He's unstable," he said, his voice level. "Weapon was a pen. It's on the floor. He's all yours." Only then did he step back. The marshals moved in, cuffing Leo's hands behind his back with swift, practiced motions. The moment he was restrained, Leo's composure shattered completely. "He provoked me," he shrieked, his face streaked with tears and sweat. "He disrespected me. You all saw it. He wouldn't show me any respect. Statham turned slowly, dabbing at the blood on his neck with a napkin handed to him by another crew member. He looked at the cuffed, hysterical man. You didn't need me to respect you, Statham said, his voice cutting through Leo's hysterics. You just needed to respect the uniform you're wearing. You failed. The plane hadn't even begun its descent into Los Angeles before the incident went supernova. The footage, captured from at least a dozen different angles, hit the internet like a digital tidal wave. The close-up of the pen, the crimson bead of blood, the shocking speed of Statham's reaction, it was all there, in high-definition clarity. By the time Flight 815 touched down at LAX, it was the #1 trending topic worldwide. Hashtags bloomed like algae in a polluted pond, hashtag Statham stabbed, hashtag pen is mightier, and the most popular, hashtag don't mess with Statham. GIFs of the takedown were already being memed, with captions like, my email finding the unsubscribe button, or me dealing with my problems. The internet had passed its verdict before the authorities even could. The plane taxied to a remote gate, where it was met not by the usual ground crew, but by a phalanx of airport police, FBI agents, and airline executives in dark suits, their faces grim. The passengers were instructed to remain seated. The cabin, once a haven of quiet luxury, now buzzed with the nervous energy of a crime scene. Leo Vance, his face pale and vacant, was the first one escorted off the plane. The swagger was gone, the influencer's smirk erased. He was just a man in a rumpled uniform, shackled and surrounded, his career and life imploding in real time. Inside the terminal, Statham was debriefed in a private lounge. He spoke calmly with the FBI agents, his account concise and devoid of emotion. His publicist, Marcus Thorne, had already arrived, his phone buzzing incessantly. Every network is calling, Marcus whispered, his eyes wide. CNN, Fox, BBC, they all want an exclusive. We can frame this. Control the narrative. Statham shook his head, accepting a bottle of water from an agent. The video is the narrative, he said simply. Tell them, no comment. Meanwhile, Oceanic Air's corporate headquarters was in full-blown crisis mode. Within 3 hours of landing, the CEO, Mark O'Connell, stood before a hastily assembled press conference. His face was a mask of practiced solemnity as he stood before a backdrop of company logos. We are appalled and deeply sorry for the horrific actions of our former employee, O'Connell read from a teleprompter. Mr. Vance's employment has been terminated, effective immediately. We have a zero-tolerance policy for any behavior that endangers our passengers or crew. They offered compensation. They promised full cooperation. But the damage was done. In the Q&A session, a sharp reporter from an online news outlet asked the question that was on everyone's mind. Mr. O'Connell, if the passenger hadn't been Jason Statham, would your response have been this swift and public? O'Connell's practiced smile faltered for a split second. He launched into a pre-canned response about all passengers being our top priority, but the hesitation had already answered the question. Everyone knew the truth. The corporate machine wasn't reacting to the assault, it was reacting to the celebrity of the victim. In the days that followed, the world's attention remained fixated on the drama of Flight 815. The media clamored for a statement, an interview, any morsel from Statham himself. He gave them nothing. The offers for tell-all specials and magazine covers were politely but firmly declined by his publicist. Instead, Statham did something no one expected. One of the passengers who had rushed to help was a former Army medic who now ran a small non-profit in San Diego dedicated to providing mental health services for veterans. Statham located him through the passenger manifest. 2 days after the incident, the non-profit's website was updated with a quiet announcement. They had received an anonymous, unsolicited donation of $250,000. It didn't take long for an enterprising journalist to connect the dots. The story, when it broke, was far more powerful than any interview could have been. The headline read, Statham responds to violence with quiet support for heroes. Meanwhile, Leo Vance's world had shrunk to the size of a federal detention cell. His meticulously curated online life was in ruins. His Instagram was a wasteland of vitriolic comments, his name a synonym for entitled rage. In his meetings with the public defender assigned to his case, he was a wreck, oscillating between fits of rage and pathetic sobs. He baited me. He was trying to make me look small, he yelled during one session, his hands shaking. I'm the victim here. My brand, my entire life is destroyed. His lawyer, a weary, overworked woman named Sarah, looked at him over her glasses. Leo, your feelings of being disrespected are not a legal defense, she said, her voice flat. The prosecution has 12 videos, statements from 20 passengers, and the testimony of 2 air marshals. The only witness we truly need is the video. It shows you, unprovoked, stabbing a man in the neck with a pen. Leo slumped in his chair, the fight draining out of him, replaced by a hollow despair. Back in his Hollywood Hills home, Statham was on a call with Marcus. The DA is pressing felony assault charges. The airline settlement offer is huge, Jason. 7 figures, Marcus said, pacing his office. We should take it, put this to bed. Statham was looking out his window at the LA skyline. It's not about the money, Marcus, he replied calmly. Donate it to the airline's employee assistance program. Let them use it to fix their own broken culture. He paused. As for the narrative, the video is the only one needed. He wrote his own ending with that pen. He understood a truth Leo never could. True strength wasn't about controlling others. It was about controlling yourself, especially when you had every reason to lose it. Leo had lost that battle long before he ever met Jason Statham. The pen was just the tool he used to sign his own confession. 2 months later, the media frenzy had subsided into a steady hum of legal proceedings. The story, however, had left a permanent mark. Oceanic Air, facing a PR nightmare, had implemented a mandatory de-escalation and psychological screening program for all cabin crew, unofficially dubbed the Statham Clause, by employees. Statham, true to his word, had remained silent. But he made one exception. He accepted an invitation to speak at the FBI National Academy in Quantico, Virginia, not to the press, but to a class of graduating new agents. Standing before them in a simple gray suit, the small, pale scar on his neck barely visible, he held their complete attention. They teach you here about threat assessment, takedowns, use of force, he began, his voice filling the auditorium. But the most dangerous weapon you will ever carry isn't your firearm. It's your ego. He paced the stage slowly. On that plane, I wasn't dealing with a flight attendant. I was dealing with a man whose ego was so fragile that a perceived lack of respect felt like a physical threat. He felt powerless, so he reached for power in the only way he knew how, with violence. He stopped and looked directly at the young agents. Control isn't about overpowering a subject. It's about overpowering your own ego before it makes you the threat. The moment you need someone else's respect to feel powerful, you've already lost control. Your real uniform isn't the badge, it's your discipline. The speech was never officially released, but the transcript was leaked and went viral, adding another layer to the legend. The civil trial was a formality. Leo Vance, visibly thinner and grayer, sat slumped at the defendant's table. The jury took less than an hour to find him fully liable. The damages were set at $2.8 million. As Statham left the courthouse, reporters swarmed him. Mr. Statham, any comment on the verdict? He paused on the steps, turned to the cameras, and delivered the only public statement he would ever make on the matter. Professionalism has a price, he said, his voice even. Today, he paid it. The final scene of the drama took place not in a courtroom, but in a private training facility a week later. Statham was there with his teenage son, teaching him the fundamentals of stage combat. He picked up a hard rubber prop knife from a table. Doesn't matter if it's this, a pen, or a real blade, he said, holding it loosely in his hand. He looked his son in the eye. The most dangerous part is the person holding it. Never forget that. Leo Vance didn't just lose his job or his money. He lost the story. He thought he was the main character, the authority in his small, airborne kingdom. But in one moment of pathetic rage, he had revealed himself to be nothing more than a villain in someone else's story, a story that now served as a global lesson. What Leo forgot, the world will now remember. What do you guys think is the true meaning of professionalism and strength? Let us know your thoughts down in the comments. If this story resonated with you, please consider sharing it and subscribing for more. And as always, please comment with respect.